Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here on the last day, early in the morning, after the nice dinner and dancing and so on yesterday. For those that did join the dancing. My name is Michael Lutz. I work for the European Commission's Joint Research Center, and together with Lars Bernhard in the front here, Wanda Nunes de Lima, my colleague, and two other colleagues that cannot be here today, Robert and Robin, we came up with this idea of running another What If session or two sessions actually at the Inspire conference this year. So what is this all about, and why are we doing this? We see that Inspire implementation is progressing, and we've seen a lot of progress, I think, this year, and to see that actually data and services are coming online and they're being harmonized across Europe. But at the same time, we also see that there's a lot of new developments in technology side. So for those of you who have made it to the plenary yesterday, we saw quite some interesting developments on what is and will soon be possible, analyzing data coming from sensors, from cars, from mobile phones, and these new technologies are really changing our economy and the society, and they're basically also posing new policy challenges. And again, that we heard that in the plenary very nicely yesterday. We also have technologies like cloud computing. We're using more and more smartphones as our basically client devices. And so there's a lot of things that are happening outside of Inspire. So we thought, okay, it's probably time to take a step back and to think a bit out of the box, to see what Inspire could look like if we were to design it today, or if we were to design it for the next 5 to 10, 15 years. Integrating new data sources, like from sensors, like from citizens, exploiting new technologies that we have in ICT. So that's basically what made us come up with this idea of the What If workshops. So the whole thing really started off with the What If We Didn't Have Inspire workshop last year at the conference, organized by some of the colleagues not in the room, but I think that was really a good start, trying to think out of the box and to see what if we didn't have Inspire. And basically I think the main outcome of that was we would probably still do it more or less the same way, maybe with some minor differences, but basically we would still build something like Inspire even if we didn't have it in 2007. So starting off from that, we organized another workshop at the OGC TC meeting in March this year. That was following more or less the same structure as we have it for this session, and you can see some photos here of that discussion. The outcome of that one was that, there were not really revolutionary ideas. Basically, a lot of people said, okay, we should really start from where we are. We should do things stepwise. We should go bit by bit and not just throw everything away and do something completely new. On the other hand, people said, okay, no one really knows what the future will bring, so we really need to be, the infrastructure needs to be flexible and reactive, agile, let's say, to react to changes, to new requirements, to new technologies. At the same time, we should not just base our changes that we propose based on theoretical ideas, but to really base them on experimentation and proven things basically that have been proven to work. As I said, the infrastructure needs to be flexible. And then one important factor, I think, was that we need to really define clearly what are the success factors of the infrastructure. And it can clearly not just be compliance. So building the infrastructure just to be compliant with it clearly doesn't make sense. So we need to really define when is it that we've really reached a success. So these were the main outcomes of that workshop. So basically what we said, okay, let's dig a bit deeper in these sessions that we're having today, in this session and the next, to look at these 5 questions. What if Inspire needs to be future-proofed? How can we ensure that the infrastructure is both resilient to these changes, but also flexible enough to take them on board? What if we wanted to include other non-administrative data providers, industry, citizens, researchers, NGOs? How do we define success in Inspire? So that's the last question that we had before. How do we really get application developers, solution providers building stuff on top of our data and services into the infrastructure? Because often they don't really know that our data exists and they don't know how to use it. Maybe they can deal with these strange geo formats that we're using and the strange geo services that we're using. So what can we do there? And how can we actually do these experiments that we want to build our future developments on? So these are really the questions that we would like to address today. And your task today basically really is to think widely and wildly, but take, of course, into account the current status of Inspire. So really don't try and say, okay, let's go completely off the books and see and assume that we don't have anything, but to really just think, okay, where we are, but with a 5 to 10 year time horizon, where could we be in that time? So we're going to break out into 3 groups after the 3 presenters presented their introductory pitches, let's say in 5 minutes. And each of the groups should develop 3 things, basically, a kind of a vision for what Inspire should look like in 2025 to 2030, what should be possible then using Inspire. Based on that, basically 2 to 3 recommendations, or more if you want, of activities that we should be reinforcing to go to that vision, things that we should probably be doing less of because they're not so important anymore, or maybe things that we should start doing that we're actually not doing at all at the moment. If possible, try and base that on real-world experience, so things that have been proven to work in your countries, in at least in projects, but ideally in production systems in your countries. And then basically go even more concrete and propose some concrete next steps or quick wins that we could work on, organizing some workshops, looking into pilots, experiments, test beds, proposing a new action to be looked at in the maintenance and implementation work program, research proposals or proposals for topics that we should be putting onto our research agenda. Anything possible. So these are the things that we would like you to do. And with that, I would say, unless there's any questions to this, we would hand the floor to our first speakers. Follow-up. We will of course discuss the outcomes and recommendations and concrete follow-up actions with the maintenance implementation group, the member state representatives, and the wider Inspire stakeholder community. So that's the one hand for the more practical follow-up steps. But at the same time, we would like to develop a paper, a manifesto for a future vision and direction for SDIs for the next 15, 20, or 10, 15 years, and publish that in the IJSDIR, in the International Journal of SDI Research, to basically as our joint outcome of the workshop, as a kind of a workshop report to summarize the findings. And we would like to ask the speakers after the session, I mean, when you go home next week, to actually maybe send us a short written summary of the sessions and the findings that you've made in your groups, so that we can use that as input for both these things for the follow-up. Okay? Any questions? Everything clear? Good. Then I would ask, I don't know who's first. It's me. It's you. Okay. Good. You do it just
So, good morning. My name is Lars Bernhard. Just possibly as an adding to what Michael said in terms of the organization. So we will have some 15, let's say 20 minutes for these 3 presentations, and then you decide where to go, to which group, in which you mainly first discuss about whatever were the proposals here. And secondly, if you find you have to get broader, you also discuss broader recommendations or recommendations from the other presentations. And we guess that each breakout group will be out there about 30 minutes or so, 30, 35 minutes, and then the presenters, so the 3 of us presenting now, we will try to wrap up on what you said in terms of recommendation and have a wrap up here in the end of the session to present these results. Okay? Okay. Michael, what did you do? Here we go. Okay. As I said, I'm Lars Bernhard. I'm from academia, so I'm holding a normal chair on geoinformatics, so I'm basically more in the technical stuff most of the days, helping PhD students to finish their PhD, often they do, and working on different things from GI usability to data integration and so forth. However, when I thought about Inspire and What If, I reduced very much to more, let's say, organizational aspects, and I hope you're there with me on that one. And this is my personal observations from some committees, if not to say several committees, where I'm invited to follow the developments of SDIs, from consultancy we do in developing Inspire aspects and so forth. And these are very broad statements. And I coded it that way that I say, look, let's start thinking not of course about an Inspire revolution, but about an Inspire evolution. And what I would recommend you would do if you start with such a thing, you behave like starting from scratch again, a bit at least. So what you would normally do, you would think, okay, what would I would do completely different if I would start today? And I guess you would all try to meet with all the Inspire experience that are running around here, have a coffee break with them and ask for their experience. And what you heard, all of you heard, I think, within the last 3 to 4 days on Inspire is possibly rightly to you, possibly not that correctly, we could discuss that, summarized in some Inspire successes and in some Inspire failures. So here are my top 3 for the Inspire successes. I think the first and most important thing, and people tend to forget that we today can find administrative geodata or environmental data. That is so useful and so used to my students that they couldn't imagine a world without being able to find geodata. So that is really a real achievement. So roughly the metadata story. It's also clear that very much of an open data attitude established within the last 10 years that hadn't been there at all before, remembering the first Inspire discussions, some of you might remember, with methodological organizations, with surveyors and so forth. So we have this open data attitude, and to me that is very much stemming out of the Inspire developments. And it's clear that Inspire was one of the early movers in this kind of development of a data infrastructure compared to others like the e-government or research data infrastructure that we just start on these activities. So that has pros and cons. Clearly, all of us are aware. We are quite experienced in all the issues we have in data sharing. That is a clear asset, a clear pro on that. And this can be used as a valuable resource, and I think most of us also use that in completely different contexts, not being Inspire, possibly nor being anything related to spatial data. So that are my top list of successes in Inspire, whereas the failures, some problems we face are, or for me the most important problem these days are that we don't have an easy access to geospatial data on environmental aspects. If I would tell a student, look, get the data for this study, he still doesn't know where to start from. He found thousands data sets, but he's still lacking this at least national Korean, that might be only a German situation, possibly some other countries, I could name some, don't do that, nationwide, reliable, coherent, ideally seamless access to spatial data. Seamless means not only seamless in spatial sense, but also in terms of the semantics plus licensing and so forth, that he or she could use for either tasks in the spatial planning or environmental monitoring or even in research. So that is for me the thing where we have to work most. And what you see here are the figures from the German reporting, and you see that we reported more than 15,000 data sets. Well, okay. I mean, where to start from there? That is, for 32 topics, that is not possibly the right way to go. So it's still tedious to have data sharing and data integration, especially data integration in place. And it is clear today, I think, to most of you, that only having the geoportal and giving access, woof, this is my data, that is not the way to go. That is not the ultimate goal of Inspire. And it's also true, and Michael said that already, that most of us see Inspire implementations still mostly as a burden because we don't see the benefits of that. So if I would come up with a recipe for today's data infrastructure, I would propose 4 ingredients. First, the rethinking about cost and efforts, possibly not a topic today, but possibly we are all a bit naive in saying, look, you could easily do that for 32 topics in this way of harmonization that we asked for. There, of course, are different options. Either you put substantial funding, tricky. Or you reduce the number of topics, that is for sure, and or you look for the requirements in terms of coherence and consistency that should be achieved. Rethinking Annex 1, what is really the core of Annex 1 would be a task there, and you try to create real synergies. And I guess in reality it's a mix of these three options. Prioritize by planning and reporting tasks. I mean, we always said that Inspire is stepwise spiral process, agile developing, blah, 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 do. We didn't really do that. We started all together, still. So the idea would be that you really would go for one task, Water Framework Directive, Noise Directive, whatever, one of these directives, for instance, and say, look, I really go into that. Or you go into the Reporting on Air Quality Directive. If you browse through this directive, I put this figure out of there, you won't find Inspire in there as a name in the recommendations. So my proposal would be you really go into one field and finish that, and then you proceed so that you really learn the lessons from that field. That is, of course, a bit provocative statement, but I want you to discuss afterwards. Third, empower one, in an ideal case, key responsible for the implementation of an infrastructure, at least within a nation, if not above the nations. And empower means not only having some people working there as a contact point, but really having power. You could, for instance, say 32 topics mean one full-time equivalent per topic. Something like that. And you give them the legally power. I think one of the main problems in Inspire was that fall in between the surveying agencies and environmental agencies, and it stayed there in between. Most of us took it to the surveying agencies. One is not nodding. So point to discuss. Stay for within the member states. Within the member states. And it always stayed a bit in between. And this is tricky. I mean, developing an infrastructure is always a cross-cutting issue. So have a strong key responsible for them and really empower them legally and financially. And last, have a clear position on coherence, consistency, and reliability of Inspire data. It is, of course, said in the directive that each data holder should report about his or her Inspire data. That is all fine. Whereas in the end, you hardly end up, as I said, with harmonized data. So I think even within the member states, it's not crystal clear how you would go for harmonized data sets in that. And you could go different ways. Either you say we have a few topics, possibly less than Annex 1 plus Annex 2, that are really developed two kind of reference data sets. So the real reference data sets that are reliable. We have a clear policy on the updating mechanisms. We have them implemented, and we have a clear reference schema so that you link your other data to these reference data sets as reference data sets should be. Or you say, look, this is not our task. You can also say that. And we don't do that as administrations, but we put that to others. And then we reduce the burden on the data providers. What I see as an issue here is that we stay a bit in between these two options, and we don't have a clear say on that. And possibly we should have a more clearer say on that, and a more clearer say, possibly by topic or whatever, on these things. And that's it, and I hope that we discuss on this one. So we move on. Is it you, Reporter? Okay. Oh. Wait. PDF or PPT? PDF or PPT?
PPT.
This one really needs power.
Is this a mouse?
I think so, but I don't know whether it works.
I'll use the keyboard, don't worry.
It could work now.
Okay. It's good for entertaining this, but thank you. Thank you, Lars. I'm Roberto Luca, I work for ESSI. We build technology and we promote the science of where, and which means we try to apply geospatial data to problems. And this is why the what if for us is what if success looks like you use it, the data is used. And I've been in ESSI for 8 years. I've been responsible for just for Inspire, so we have been working on this with our users for 8 years, and we collected a number of feedback, and I'd like to share our experience with it. So you see here, this is the big roadmap. I think in this room we are all familiar with it, and there was a midterm implementation review report, and that stated, and I would agree even today, that it's important to simplify and promote the sharing of data and make it easy. I was very excited when that plenary took place in, I think it was Denmark, Aalborg, 2014. Check out the video. I was impressed that he only had 50 views on YouTube. That means that we are a very small community. And so realize that when you think about how come it's not widely used. But in that video or in that plenary, Ulla could speak for me now. She said, hey, it has to be usable, and it will be, and because it's a must. So we still think the same way, and we think it's time to act on this. And we started contributing also to the What If Michael mentioned earlier. We did have a session at the OGCTC meeting in February, and that was kind of the same title, and we kind of evolved from there. There is another statement in a GM article and interview where I would still agree on the outcomes. INSPIRE is not bad. It's not bad at all, but there are a few things we think that should be reviewed, and especially those that have to do with technology and evolution and innovation. So we are dealing with standards and specs that are 10, 12 years old, if in an optimistic way, and we see BMW and others solving problems with very modern technologies. So that's just a provocatory example, right? So the 2021 is the goal with, and we can discuss about prioritizing, right? But they say, hey, that's used, right? And so could you solve this? Could you really feed SDG indicators out of INSPIRE, as this article is stating? So those are the open questions that we want to use as a driver before 2021, possibly. I know it takes time, but we think it's time to take a few actions. This is something that kind of just gives you the picture of how rapidly the technology moves, right? We couldn't speak about sensor. We couldn't really speak about the bandwidth we have today on the web, the IoT, and many other technology keywords that we now use as a given. And at the same time, at the policy or even programmatic framework, we see the growth of open data as something that actually works quite well at any geographic scale. So there are cities, even with 1,500 people, inhabitants, with a small open data site that interacts with the province and works. And how is that defined? It's very loosely connected, it's very organic. There are data and formats that are defined by user needs. And those are pretty common. They are not, it's not, even if we want to exhaustively list those are really few formats. We also see the philosophy that is behind open data in Copernicus. I think when I speak with many different colleagues, the Science Data Hub that the European Space Agency has set up is pretty good interpretation of the open data framework as a way to decouple how you exploit the data from how you get access to the data to then start the work, the real work, or the second part of the real work. There is a lot going on before that happens. So we think there are good examples already. And we work worldwide, and we see that this picture is pretty common across the world. It's not a European issue. It's not distributed GS. It's not something that is European specific. But this normally works. I put INSPIRE, GEOS, Copernicus because probably you're all familiar with this, but it could be the national implementation. It could be your region. And this is not a hierarchy. So we tend to look at INSPIRE as a hierarchical structure, right? It goes from the region up to the country, but everybody actually can use everything here. And there are different data models. Yes, they may spend a little bit of time, but it's more about how to structure the data in terms of conceptual than the actual encoding. So we have a living atlas, for example. We have 3,000 layers. That's it. and it covers the globe for so many meaningful applications. We don't have 15,000, we don't have 100,000, so that's not a number that tells you how good your implementation it is in our experience. You are familiar with these system APIs, that's very important. It's not just theory. We have, for example, some numbers here. 4.4 million users are registered users in RGS Online, and every day they use, connect, collaborate, share, consume others' data very effectively. And most of the times there is about at least 1 or 2 layers that are OGC WMS. So it's not don't think about this as this is an S3 specific view. We see some of the OGC standards very well used also within the platform. And this is why we support them. So this is our set of discussion topic. We heard yesterday, for example, from another DG that the feedback was when they were trying to organize too much the data sharing or to the details, they said, please provide soft guidelines. So this is one way to look at this. And this part is so big for us, at least I think, that it includes data model, UML, up to the encoding, the GML, the XPath, and this is the interpretation today. 6 months ago was different. You should check this note on some sub website. This is what it is today. There are so many good things, but also a few things that could be corrected. So our view is, for example, based on user feedback, is we don't want to just implement for compliance. This was the main driver for many years, but now the feedback is, well, that's not enough. I need to use it. It's expensive. It requires efforts to organize the data and think about it. So make sure that I can actually use it, and I don't have to build a parallel site so that users can actually make something out of it. And so what we are going to do is select implementation options. We are not trying to wipe the whole specification or technical guidance out, but we are trying to select those that we think they have an exploitation opportunity. So not all of them have, in our opinion. Sometimes we have to talk about hosted services because as we go down to the local government, that's a big topic. But the other one I would like to mention is room for innovation. So there are so many de facto standards that I've heard being mentioned during this week. Vector tiles, GeoJSON, shape files even, which, by the way, even in our statistics is the most downloaded format even today. So those are things that we would like to introduce for discussion. Maybe there is an opportunity to change or suggest adding and modifying 3% of the whole Inspire universe, just the specification that deals with the pure technology, because those may require a little bit of modernization. And possibly not just for one cycle, but there is a framework to govern that and modify over time. So again, we are almost at the end of 17. I think I'm an academic as a background, so I like to brainstorm a lot, but I think as we look at the timeline, I think it's time to really try to apply some of these. I think we are maybe open for debate. I think we are all on the same page. I think we all recognize that a few things don't work very well. And it would be nice to apply and not just recognize those. So we hope that we can provide our contribution, but with all of you, and see whether we can fix or improve a few aspects in Inspire. Thank you very much, and sorry if I took a few minutes extra.
Okay, so we move on to the last one, Lisa. I hope I find, oops. Yeah, it should work. Just wait. Sorry. This doesn't work. Okay.
Yes, good morning on my part. So I'm Satyanen, coming from National Land Survey of Finland. Here you see my title, Linked Data Deployment for SDI. I guess it's all about how we could increase and improve the use and benefits from spatial data. And perhaps the linked data is the issue or answer there. And my contribution is here in 4 slides actually. Platforms, framework for linked data, infrastructure and RDF, how to use RDF, and in the bottom but not the least is semantic search. So it's said that Inspire is based on national infrastructures. So I've made a new kind of view on the layer architecture of SDI. Might be Inspire as well. On top there is integration rule, which is based on data linking. In the bottom there is interoperability rule that's already set in place in Inspire. Here the common specifications box is referring to services to data providers and common services for use of data. And in the middle we have interoperability, platform layer, as we have in our new national geospatial platform program that we have just started in the beginning of this year. So I'm about to describe how we are doing there. And there is the service bus and different channels for administration, enterprises, citizens, and including authentication, authorization. So this integration is based on data linking, and it might provide API services, linked data service, semantic search, all in the web-enabled form. Our framework for this linked data infrastructure is based on a national recommendation for unique identifiers of spatial data. And there we have data models not only on spatial object level, but also real-world objects and concept level. And the concepts describing spatial objects, they are also captured in a spatial data ontology that's part of our national ontology. So the national ontology concept hierarchy integrates spatial data and non-spatial data. And you can see in the URI pattern we have dataset ID, which is also creating the connection to metadata. So I think it's describing all the necessary connections in this short way. And the way how RDF database is used in the data linking is in this simplified picture. Basically we are loading all the data in RDF database, and the data searches themselves, they still, or for the time being, they are using WFS. But also, of course, we can use for data linking itself, we can use JSON LD and for use of data as well. But as far as we need spatial data geometry, we use WFS. So how to implement this structure is that in the geospatial platform that we are building up, we are creating the links to the external data sources which are most frequently used through the Spatial endpoints and upload them also in the RDF database. And we can also synchronize the data with the source data with a simple script. We are using Apache Sena Fuseki server here and own script to updates. So I think there should be, no, yes, this is the last slide. So the semantic search is actually the heart and the beef of this structure. And it's based on this kind of, RDF store where we have this spatial data ontology with connected to the national ontology, which is called Finto, and also we have the contents of the registry service, CMAS code list and code values, and this ontology makes up the structure that can manage the semantics. And how we make these contents crawlable? This is the picture that shows that from any searches from any search engine or discovery service, we direct to a landing page, which is all of this here. Sorry, I lost it. Okay, so the landing page is showing the metadata description of the selected data sets, but at the same time it's also it's the battery, showing a search space for more spatial dates. So we use search insights to throw the customers or to bring the customers into the spatial data infrastructure. And if the spatial data is okay, that is needed, then we can also direct the semantic search to the feature URL and advanced search using WFS and for instance search the data for certain code values through this semantic linking. And there are other links also for these API interfaces, linked data services, and so on. That box might include also algorithms or some stored queried for adjustable searches by code list values and so on, and then some more links. So that's the basic structure, and I still have a few minutes, so I can show also the.
You're running out of time. You have only 5 minutes. You had already.
Sorry.
Let's
Okay.
possibly stop here.
That's
otherwise
okay.
We don't have time for discussion.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So we now move on to the interactive part. You remember that? And I would say that we group in these three teams or groups. So if you say that Roberto stays in that corner, if Isa would be so kind to go, let's say, in that corner, and I would stay in this corner here, so that you would team up to each of the groups. And the idea again is that you discuss about what was proposed in the presentations. And I'm looking for Michael's present. That you group there and that you discuss about your tasks. So you discuss these recommendations, and of course you have some ideas on how to implement these recommendations. So again, Roberto here, Isa in the corner there, myself here. So please join us for discussions. And we reconvene at 10:15 for the wrap-up. Okay.
Yeah, and we leave the slide up here, so yeah.
Das mal runterlegen.
Ach so, sorry.
I think the goal is trying to find a couple of pragmatic recommendations that will be reported. Technical report. So I shared some ideas. I think maybe take 2 minutes to optimize message. I've been working for 8 years for a very
So just as a reminder,
hired me at the time.
first thing was about cost and cost.
Most of our users were asking for compliance. There was this expectation that also the complex options more and as we moved over time and they saw they also participated in the same kind of stakeholder user organization open the product when they started comparing the cost and the benefits of implementation. The model is great, and there are two things that don't seem to work fine for our users. And so, our experience is primarily related to the technical barriers.
It's always must be more fun.
I was 8 to 9 years there. 20 years ago, I was there. Those was the time when there was a new set of standards being done widely used. Maybe that was the first pioneer trying to use it, and so we think there are still a few changes that will be applied. And we also hear that it would be nice to conflate operate and aspire philosophy. It's also programmatic frame. Typically open data is organized in such a way that sort of respond to feedback also. So you provide the data, maybe your feedback is it would be nice if we can provide a better scale. And then, so it doesn't have to do with mind, it's all about usability.
Because it's not.
There is an endless set of use cases, but the pattern is designed to respond interactively.
It all needs to be fused
And
into
it
the
doesn't
same.
have anything to do with pace or funding, it's just a modality.
So I think there is a lot
Adapt.
we can do
So,
with synergy.
I don't know if you have any thought typically with
I don't think it's realistic
on
to
this,
have another.
that we can, if you agree with this, or if you disagree, please. I guess that.
And we can also have an open discussion just for the start.
I think from my point of view, Inspire forgets about the community, and that's our users. And I think what we need to build into the Inspire frameworks is the ability to tell us what they want. We need users to be able to find our stuff without having to go to special catalogs. Google can't crack into the CSW, but actually we want Google to be able to find our stuff using Google. So that's two things from my point of view, that if I had a magic wand, I would do that as well. Listen to the users, what do they want, help them find our stuff by allowing Google to find it. Google, Bing, whatever. So that we can get the big search engines finding it. Because that, to me, I mean, I think main problems like describing
We are going to have a lot of big projects.
Also have a background in academia.
Okay. Nice to meet you. In another opinion. It's not there. I think the problem is, it's not really
This is an academic experience. This is something made by the university professors already media and smart without any hints of any people outside in the data. Our opinion. And for me, you pointed we need to listen to the users. We are setting up things that are not adapted to the users. It's 10 years ago that we developed this. It's even 10 years that we cannot open the doors to users. No one has ever worked in the smoothly working model to open completely it's close to it, yeah. So I come to the questions. Yes, I have a recommendation. Please pay attention to practitioners and not to theoretical ones. Open my recommendation to peers in the community. Please open your minds to what the users say and be able to change. A big mistake was to put those implementing by legal framework and now they are bounded like this to something. These things are being kept. Yes? We are open also technology services and fun, but also to download service you get files that you can use, for example, geo package. Exactly. Shapefiles are what most people use these days, but we all know shapefiles.
Sorry, just pay attention to that. Yeah, please.
Yes.
No, we have time.
I say, open pay attention to what people say, to enforce open standards, not closed standards. Standards attached to the company.
So what do you mean by open? Most of the conference people not using S3 has been pushing for GeoJSON and I'm saying this because we also implement those and we acknowledge they are very important. That's why more rapidly respond to users. I'm just throwing a keyword at the browser. You tell me if you agree. There is a process in GCP called community center. And this is fast standardization process, which means that GeoRSS has been out for a long time. Many browsers Google use it, Rethinking use it, but it was not the standard. You don't want to spend 5 years of your time on a full understanding that when it's finished, it's no longer useful. So we contributed, for example, to a template from CP standard, community standard, and it took like 5 months. And the reason why GeoRSS was also less. And I'm saying this because as we think about what response to the needs, I think it's important to keep the time necessary to respond into account. So maybe if you're okay, and then before we wrap up, I'll show you the slide. And
those were my recommendations.
Yes.
If you don't have any chance to develop a state-of-the-art mindset, that you first define everything, you have an engineering approach that you conceptualize, define, and then you start implementing it. And this phase ahead that took so much time, as you said, at one point it was starting to develop, it was almost state of the art, and that is 10 years back.
It's a classic waterfall.
It's a classic one, and the ones who have conceptualized Inspire, they are mostly technical background. That results in a 225 pages technical document for each annex. So it is not easy to use and not easy to implement. And if I need to, I mean, I can cover basically everything in Inspire, any scenario that I can't describe one at all, because it's too generic to be usable. And that's the reason for the I very much like the idea of OSM, that you have conventions lesser than rules. And that is something I would think ahead for Inspire. I mean, I'm German, I'm very much on specifying anything beforehand and have a discussion on any kind of legal implication they are possible. If that has an effect, but why not something starting small, see if that established, and then getting bigger, and not framing the whole picture, and then starting to put the pen on and start drawing.
You need to go agile. It needs to be much more agile.
That is the point.
And be organic.
And the agile development, I mean, that is coming from the bottom-up approach of open data, of NGOs, whereas Inspire is top-down approach. I mean, that is
I'm not a fan of that, but this seems a classic thing where you get quick wins and therefore provide
both is in drawback in a lot of people of Inspire. The top-down approach has the burden and this is most motivation to do Inspire was, as you say, we are bonded, we have to, we must. And that is not a motivation. That is the force you said there is a community missing. Because do I want to engage in something just because I have to, or because I want to? So if it's not appealing, not attractive, also. So being agile and some community, think what the users actually need, and using these strands of switching systems. Yes. Rules and rigid guidelines by those conventions.
May I ask something introducing open data? I'm fine. And you see that roughly they are more or less the same age. Since open data and the growth is exponential. Right?
The other thing that I would say related to this is that, and I don't know if you can provide, if you already mentioned it, sorry, is that you mentioned that complicated things are getting independent. So one thing that I heard a lot, especially for the past year, is that municipalities, more local government implementing.
Okay, reduce the
Well, I have to do it, but what can I do? So wasn't involved. They don't know the point of contact, even if they help them with the points of contact, transfer enough capacity and knowledge, it's not just the hostage, data proliferation and
yeah, but actually this is against the Inspire rules. Any kind of duplication. As in Inspire directive, there is quite clearly mentioned that no, there's only one entity which is responsible for this particular data.
But still, there is a requirement that you publish all data sets. And I think that
I need to provide it.
will be disobedient.
They don't know their customer.
It is not
They don't
like
know their user, their
everybody
client.
has a data set and publish
So,
the metadata. We started out responsible for the nationwide coverage, and those are the only ones we have to focus on. I know it's rules, but I mean, they didn't make sense. So we took the other
you knew that your data was being used. nowadays I just have the statistics. Oh yeah, that WMS was accessed 300,000 times, but I even don't know who was accessing it. Where does it come from? So what are the needs? What are they doing? Where is my data going? What are the products? So the provenance or not the product, but the usage of all my data. Traceability things that we don't understand. That is also part of motivating the service provider because they see that the data is used.
Okay, now what's because I've heard a similar comment from France where so can you mention again also fairly simply implement okay, happy to get confirmation.
You mentioned small, very small towns which are legally binding to publish and this happening legislation these guys something very simple, they put data in the okay, but when you're mentioning it's two things that you're mentioning. One is the question, how can you support small communities to help them to do stuff, and not everybody has to set up their own infrastructure. But the other question is, if you have your infrastructure in place, how do you know where your data is going to? Even if you do open data, you probably would like to know what to justify using it, what is it being used for, in order to actually open it. So that's the missing link. That's actually what I'm going to talk about in the next session. Is this question actually, what is missing to get to know your users? Is it a technical problem?
Tracing your users?
I just want to say,
This is
actually,
another
kind of want to
aspect.
comment
Here is really the point.
all of
Because
this,
when people want to do
I will not
from the roadmap,
so maybe start from the back.
and for me, this was somehow a nonsense, as you point out, because
and it's basically because
so that's not the idea at the beginning.
public
Have
and
data,
non-governmental
all data
organizations
available. What does it mean? Being good, being not good, being national, and being authoritative or not authoritative. Who cares? People want to have a lot. And this was the starting point. Now, of course, so
they do this, but they go to these ministries and their offices for them to open the data, and at the same time they say once you open data and once it's available via internet, once it's available online, basically this is the point that you're losing manifold power in your data. This is like once the data is on the back, why would you need to know who's your user when it's used? You actually care, because then if the user doesn't get what they need from what's on the website, be sure that they come back. They understand this. Right.
provided the metadata, then now few services
But, you know, and that's the other thing I want to talk about. Everyone, I don't know, of detail, oh, that's something I have to know, something I don't, but it costs me something. But on the other hand, everyone is, as the professor from Dresden University said, like my students are absolutely used to use the ordnance or the ordnance data, and that's it. Like the universities or the small data providers provide because they get this back. If you provide, your benefit is to have data from someone else, and that's that's the coordination, and that's how the infrastructure should work. You shouldn't just count that like this CD is now and you shouldn't guess so much who's on the second side, because at the same time to produce your data you use the data from someone else, but you might not have them free. there's no, city transfer anymore, and that's why I think.
That's a bigger picture. Some agencies, in particular small municipalities, you will see it because they see it as a burden of reporting requirements. So that is, you're absolutely right, but that is something, that aspect. Maybe not everybody, not homogeneous to still see it as just as a burden and as a missing pension for themselves.
But then, like if you want to speak, then you have to speak.
Yeah.
Like I'm in the national contact point starting with, it's too complicated, I don't want to give money for that. And if I see the same arguments, maybe the same arguments, they hear afterwards, then I'm just getting angry. It's like, look at check mapping agency, how much data is now online, harmonized, there is here, and you can use it. So do your best and do the same.
Sorry for interruption. Just bear in mind that we have 8 minutes. So I collected all these statements and then I put a small section of recommendations. So maybe if you're, hey, we look together at this, once we nice, we'll have to.
So everyone, just to let you know, you have around 10 minutes to go, so please move towards your recommendations and your concrete next steps in case you haven't started. Thanks.
And from the 20% not only requiring not only governor knows how to use the website. So very small, quite small fraction of people who can really use all of the Inspire services we work hard to provide. Basically, the use case is very simple. I want to easily find with some semantic notions what I'm looking for. So, like Google search engine, and I want to download the file. The data set very simple to use, a shape file. And it's all in many cases.
This is confirming what he is probably doing as well. And what is interesting is during one of the sessions, I think Wednesday, they were explaining the typical workflow that they want. And then at the end of all this, after they discovered you can go to but actually what they really want is a shape file. So the recommendation I capture is to listen to the user, and if that is what they need, that's what I'm saying.
If we're into some priorities defined, let's begin with that. Make really this use case work and easy to use.
I agree, and what happens in my experience is that maybe it's 50% of the things,
I really strongly
but then is meant to then actually solve. This is the reality.
it will never be efficient.
Yes, very real.
But that's actually a topic that will come in the next one. I think it's very important that we build it just as a view into the data.
I have no solution.
It's a tiny thing in the
Really, when you give your data for students, it's a very large topic. Another topic is the municipality. We've been in Sweden, at least, prior application in Swedish law, except municipalities. This is to be it is the national and regional government because the municipality.
Yeah,
How many municipalities have? 1,000 inhabitants. then you need a couple of
Whereas I was still paying for the Annex 1 and Annex 2 because
it's going to be
easy way to get
it's going to be
So if I'm not wrong, Ritria
reference
in
of
Sweden
time
is
data
hosting
sets. So
half of
it's all done and it's something that
yes,
we're
but
very
not
excited about. But I got your point there. You think it should be
but still the national level.
it's a long institution.
So the reason why,
We cannot skip.
maybe we can all look at this, and if you
Maybe you're not paid.
So it makes
and if
no
you see,
sense to
so
skip
I
them
recognize
as
the
free,
notes
although it's
and
very
then recommendations. So if you see any change you want to apply, maybe we do a first round, you read it, and before reworking, let's do a water. Or read.
Okay, so there's a few things. Just having with my friends, I had two more quotes.
Yeah, it was a quote. It was a quote. But those are notes as example. I thought
The other one was over here.
the recommendations are like the summary of the more general insights.
I would like just to share with you some solution which can be.
You did.
What we were talking about is
So,
Google.
Yeah, it's the
Yes.
conversation. Tracking meant it's not something that everybody knows. So, and I think sometimes making a very clear example helps because this is like a 1% thing.
They are on the national level, so we have 34 teams and 11 coordinators. So some coordinators has several teams. So this is the solution which actually works. However, in some cases, this authority is not the producer of the data. And sometimes there is a problem how they understand the data and how
If you go onto your phone today, what are
organize
you going to
all
look
this
something on Google?
for the
You're
specific
not going to
thing.
use
But still such a
just
solution
basic data
exists, and
infrastructure, which is
we
requirement
have
of
some
data.
kind of board
You need to go
which
into Google Phone.
meets
And by the way, if I
from
just
time
say
and they
inspired to
decide
follow,
how
inspired
to organize all these activities within particular things.
inspired data. I would find
So I don't know if it is what you just asked for.
so many.
I mean, so in
Italy, for example,
must not necessarily be one responsible, but you have to research it. But these
Yeah,
structure that you have,
there is one. So, but I think this is a very broad, the accessibility for the non-just professional.
not perfect, obviously, but it is the way to go, and I know that you have a similar approach.
Yeah, we also have identified who are the responsible authorities. And we have also
Independent of this own national then if you have one fits all
next
approach, they are
topic that
restricted and that's readable.
I don't think it's a problem. It's a consequence of the complete.
Any change
Yes,
or anything missing?
I think we realize that
maybe we should focus
we need
less on
some power
the technology and understand how to implement what needs to implement it.
So that is our big problem. We have built our systems very legally binding, but they really, one or two are doing okay.
Too much alcohol last night.
Issues that we need to identify
And also how to
Sorry.
as much as possible. Once people realize that
basic data.
there are responsibilities in office, there are boards, there are laws,
Technically, but what we can see is that out of these,
This brings us to the
like this, and we cannot change the governance of each country. If there's something at the common
So can I say,
I would mind, my recommendation is
simplify
who has a local
on
make it more than this.
If you use vector classifiers, use JSON, like some recommend, it's like that happens by definition. But yeah, but maybe if you think we can say simplify some complex.
And that you lose the ability to explain or show what you want.
Please slowly come to an end if you can.
And you also remove the exclusive expansion if you flatten as well.
This is the story.
This is personal opinion.
Okay. Yes.
Anonymous.
Okay.
Well, feel free to, help me edit if there is anything that
I would not see any sense in providing.
So you have another thing.
Just kidding.
Generate huge amounts of
I didn't want to interject some of your comments. But I do also think in other regions, for example, there is a question like
description of any
normally knows
you will generate
how much
and you would have
and then they sometimes wonder, okay, how
one-to-one
useful is
it's
right? So kind of cost nobody really plans to transfer data, right? But sometimes it's useful to look at it. I think it's not pure traceability, but what happens normally.
we should come up with some data sets
Actually using as well as that or
and then find out which
how much it is, right? Then who does it is not necessary, but at least it is somewhere. Like if you say, if I stop this, or in my code, update the data set every other year, instead of every 6 months, it goes up, or not, will happen. There is within the application. So there are, it's not really. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, I think we need to stop it here. I hope you all managed to answer at least some of the questions. And I would invite the three presenters. Who wants to start? Maybe we do the reverse order. Esa, do you want to start, please? Maybe while Esa's coming up here, I tried to make a list of the people in each group. If you're interested to stay in touch with us and continue the discussion online through email or maybe we can set up a wiki or something like that and help us in preparing the final publication about that, please put your email here on the sheet. I'll pass that around so we can get in touch with you afterwards. Okay? Thanks. Esa, please. Okay. First, I don't know if we can connect. Yeah, you can try and
That's what I don't have. I have
oh, you don't.
HDMI.
Okay, another.
There, yes.
Here.
Oh, you have one?
No, but it's just going from whatever to HDMI. Oh, you have one. Okay, cool.
Yeah, stupid interoperability issues.
Let's see.
How could Inspire ever work if you have these kind of issues?
No.
think it's a
How do
wrong
I
one.
put? How do I write down?
There we go.
God, I couldn't see it. Glasses.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we had quite a wide discussion around, and first comment is that actually we need less semantics because it's complicated. Actually, data needs to be simple. But after talking a while, we found out that regarding semantics and linked data, it needs user-friendly services, and we also talked about that actually semantics are for data management, as we have a lot of data sets around, and how does the user find the data fit for purpose. So linked data needs user-friendly services. That's a recommendation. Another issue is that we need open source clients to motivate and facilitate users. Open source is here the keyword. Open source is needed. And sell spatial data better was a general headline for recommendations that could include cookbook on Inspire, SDI in general. It might include hackathons as actions. JSON encoding is necessary for spatial data in general, and Inspire Spatial to make data more employed and exploited. Cookbook needs practical examples, and for that also experiments are needed. And then lastly, you need to make your data crawlable, because how nowadays people search data is through Google. Then there were some other discussions here in the small printing. I will open it in my notes, but the question was that, is the geospatial platform centralized? Well, the answer was semantics actually connect several big sources, but I was to write platforms. So you can have several platforms if you have common semantics to manage the data contents, so you can make semantics search through the or across the platforms as well. Another, perhaps more simple approach for managing integration was place names. Use OpenStreetMap geonames, and why this is not included in Inspire. The comment also was that the national place name register are not good enough for the contents and extent and for the details. So that's why the crowdsourced data is needed. But after all, semantics are necessary for data management with a lot of data sets available nowadays. That's about the conclusions. The top issues here are our recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this was yours.
You should try. Would you try the stick? No, this is the remote thingy.
Yes. I didn't have one. Thank you. It may be the other way around. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oop. Is it here?
Ouvrir.
How come it's not opening? Okay.
It needs to be really power and pressing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Group notes. Here we are. Thank you, Lars. So the recommendation are at the bottom. I'll just go through, and here is a kind of internal, between friends language. So a couple of quotes, but important is Inspire forgets about community, so there is a need to find way to listen better to their needs, and I know it's kind of a challenge, but that's I think it was unanimously one of the most agreed comments. And saying find resources without cracking a CSW catalog. Of course, that is not cracking in terms of security, but is how easy is the use of these interfaces for a developer who is building many type of application, and geospatial is just one of, or for a user, simply a consumer. So listen to user, pay attention to practitioners. From France, we heard some examples like most of the time they want to download a file or connect to WMS or a dev-friendly format. Open data is a mainstream pattern. It includes data provision, but you also need to have ways to collect this user track or collect these user preferences and so on. And user feedback, because otherwise you don't know what is that is worth to improve. There are campaigns on open data at the country level in some countries. So it sounds like there is always this kind of potential opportunity of coupling open data programs, if I may say, with Inspire. Apply more than an academic exercise. That was the other comment, and technology has changed. So the recommendations are kind of reflecting this. We try to be a little bit pragmatic, see whether these are applicable. So be agile, avoid waterfalls process and top-down approach, which complicates discussing the benefits. It's very hard to be all involved from a city to, again, only 50 people, so the plenary on YouTube is less than any skateboard guy tracking a video just for fun. And second, listen to community needs. There is some overlapping, and maybe we should reorder those, but listen to community needs. Focus on what and not the how, in terms of governance, in terms of how you prioritize. So perhaps less technology discussion. That's focus on real binding Inspire requirements. Complexity is often in the non-legal binding part. So again, that's I think communication-wise, it could be something can be done for this. Soft guidances, conventions instead of rules. Apparently OpenStreetMap, I didn't know that, but uses convention instead of rules. But in general, remove the technical guidance as they are today. They are too detailed and rigid. Open standards, that's a preference. No proprietary, I think we all agree on this. There is also some new opportunities like OGC community standards. That is a faster process to get a standard adopted, typically 5-6 months. That's what I've seen for GeoRSS or 3D. So it could be a way to also keep up, not just modernize once, but actually as a governance model, consider those opportunities. I think this is, unless my group has additional comments, this is what represents our feedback. Thank you. I can remove it, or you want it?
Not yet.
Okay.
I tried with the cable also.
Yeah.
Just a second. Okay. So it's me with the final set. Hello. Yeah, here we go. So we structured the discussion a bit along the topics that I proposed. The first one was on things and efforts. And there was a clear statement that we should still much more focus on creating synergies. And that is the other statement. The statement is in another way a coding of Inspire is not only for compliance of Inspire. So Inspire is not only for the sake of Inspire, but it should come with applications. There was this nice saying of funding follows success. So once we have successes based on Inspire solutions, then the participants tend to agree that then there will be also more easily found more sustainable funding for Inspire developments. So that is roughly on the member states level. And also there was this strong request of rethinking the Inspire timeline. So in essence, to say that if we now try in any way to fulfill the reporting guidelines and the reporting of Inspire data, for instance, by November, that we put a lot of effort into that, but still we all know that these are, and of course that is not an official quote, that we have halfway solutions and we could have better spent the time and the effort into providing real solutions, but having a bit more relaxed timeline. There was this proposal of always reconsidering and considering the existing EU funding schemes and try to make even better use of them, whereas all tend to agree that it's of course only an adding to the Inspire implementations for some more developments, but it's not really helping getting in sustainable funding for the Inspire implementations within the member states. In terms of priorities or prioritizing, there was this notion of saying, look, the metadata was mainly meant to get an idea of what is out there. That does not necessarily say that all what is out there has to get published and out there in the public. So we should understand the metadata exercise in the Inspire as is necessary first step, but we now should go and focus on consolidating the number of data sets and getting into a more coherent data set for them, and then also have that as a current main task. So we should, in an ideal case, focus very much on nationwide and pan-European coherent data sets, topic by topic, this very much driven by use case, as Roberto also said, and for instance, environmental reporting on a European level would be the natural use case for Inspire, and we should very much focus on that one. For the responsibilities and key responsibles, of course, you could see that there is a difference in the different member states' regimes, federal and less federal states, let's put it that way. We had the example of Poland, where you have 11 coordinators, and it roughly works so far to get things consolidated on national level. We have the example of Denmark, where we have about six coordinators for the 32 topics, and it was remarked that the capability and creating capabilities here is still an issue. It is a tough task to implement Inspire. And the question was how the European Commission could best help in getting these responsibles more empowered, and also, of course, getting them more practical, having more capabilities in implementing Inspire. So that is a bit of an open topic that we have there. And then on the coherence and consistency, the notion was that the answer on what should be coherent and consistent on a national or even European level should be very much user-driven. So there was the proposal to rethink about the Annex 3 specifications and to rethink whether they really result in data sets that are usable by users. And that also there the roadmap and the timeline should get more relaxed, so to really achieve coherence for the topic by topic again, and that we should imagine that it takes at least another decade to get to coherent data sets for all the topics that are named there. So that is roughly how I hope the summary of the discussion. Is there any adding to that?
I think this second bullet needs to be better explained, because nobody said that what is there. It was said that it's not time to change, but just to rethink in terms of see how to get it there, no?
I think the notion was that it was said that it turned out that for one data, and I think the example was soil data, it turned out that it's not really usable to the ones that use the soil data in the end. So that would roughly mean that you possibly would rethink the spec.
If I read like that, I think, yeah.
It's not. It was not my remark. So is that fair?
The case to refit or to make it better in detail.
Okay, we add that too.
That's completely different. I mean, if what is there is so, it's not enough to get meaningful data for users, means that what is there is not enough. It's not that we have to rethink the data model package as a whole. You see what I mean? Knowing the tendency to say that the Annex 3 data it's too much, it's better don't invest on that. I think it's an area which is really delicate to handle in that sense, because otherwise it can be useless because it's too less, or it can be useless because it doesn't make any sense at all. And those are two different situations to tackle.
Okay, but I mean, it was a statement that was made in the discussion. The only idea is here to summarize that, and I make it a bit more concrete. But I hope that okay, I hope that fits to what you said. Is that okay?
Yes, it fits to what I meant. And what I think is that we shouldn't start to change the regulation, because this would be a huge field of discussion without great sense. I would start to try and find out on the market what the users really need. And afterwards, I would rethink if we could refine our definitions maybe in 10 years. And then you have an experience of the field, and with this experience you find better.
Okay, so I put it that way. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks very much. I think what I wanted to say on this topic is clearly I think we only made the first step now. I think we really need to elaborate a bit on not only this topic but all the other recommendations. And what we didn't really get to was the concrete next steps and what we could do. I think that would need more time. So I think if you're really interested to follow up the discussion with us online, please make sure that your name and email is on this paper so we can get in touch with you afterwards. And we'll get in touch, and maybe through the thematic clusters, for example, we'll put these kind of discussion topics up, and maybe then we can have a bit of a discussion online and trying to refine these things before we then move to the...
And the same for the position paper. We try to make it in a kind of open process.
Yes.
However that works in the end. So hope it works.
We'll keep you posted. Okay.
So see you again in the second session, hopefully, to proceed in the discussion and in best way also to get to more recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Ja, super.
Ja, genau.